discuss personnel issues regarding the process to fill the vacancy, and personnel issues are an exception to the Sunshine Law. Also, I guess next in line is we have we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance and then we'll move on. Okay, I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No. All right, Michael, you're waiting for that. We're being recorded, so we can start with the solicitor's opinion on a candidate. We have a solicitor's opinion on a candidate saying that the candidate should not be included in the process. So I'm throwing that out to the body of council.
What would be the problem, the process?
Okay, you weren't there. We have the issue of a candidate who, according to the solicitor's opinion, is not eligible to be interviewed.
Well, this solicitor, but the previous solicitor said that he was eligible.
Well, we're not going to go to the previous solicitor, but we have a letter from his attorney stating that he is eligible. So I'm throwing it out to council. What are we going to do?
I'll make a motion that we vote on this either way, and I'll make a motion that we go by the previous solicitors, the president that we already have said, and appointing somebody with the controller, and also with other opinions from other attorneys. The candidate has contacted, and I think we have an opinion. We have something from other municipalities as well, like Reading, and that allow this to happen in the past.
Are you just saying you're moving to?
I'm moving to.
I second
To allow the candidate that has been canceled to be interviewed.
You're moving that he be interviewed?
Yes.
Okay.
it. That's not what we're voting on, is it?
That's-
Yes, to be, whether this body is going to say, yes, we're going to interview him or not. That's what we're looking at. However, I don't think we should bring in the past solicitor's opinion or the opinions from somebody in Reading, because we don't have those here in front of us. So we have a letter from his attorney stating and citing some case law, stating that he should be allowed.
Do you have the letter?
I don't have it now, but it was given to each of us.
So we need to make a motion?
I made a motion that we allow it.
You're making a motion that that candidate be allowed to proceed.
He has to be second, yes.
But I just want to make sure the motion's right first before we get a
Yes.
second.
I make a motion that we vote on it.
We gotta get a second or not first here.
Oh,
We can't make a second motion until that one's.
Correct.
I will second my colleague's motion that Mr. O'Connell be allowed to participate in the process.
Okay, then I guess we're now at the process. Does anybody else from council want to speak?
are we voting?
No, you have a chance to speak first. We have a motion on the floor, you can speak on the motion. Either pro or con.
And the public can
I'm,
speak as well.
yeah, I would like to uphold the motion to uphold the solicitor's opinion.
Well, we gotta vote on this motion first. So it's comment on the motion that's on the floor now. And the motion that's on the floor now is to allow that candidate to proceed based on and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but based on the opinion of the letter that his attorney sent. So again, but what I'm doing is opening it up to council for any comment on that motion.
Mr. President, thank you.
Mr. Roberts, go ahead.
my opinion on this is that we should vote no on this motion. We have a detailed opinion from our solicitor, backed up with research into some relevant case material that makes a compelling case that we have an issue with the charter. When you read the background information, it states that in cases of dispute in a home rule charter, a plain English interpretation of what was written is what you need to do. When you look at the provision of 209C, it says, and I quote, "No council member shall hold any compensative appointive city office or city employment until 1 year after his or her resignation or 1 year after the expiration of the term for which the member was elected to council." For me, the operative word is employment. If you are collecting a paycheck, if you are collecting benefits, if you have executive function over 800 plus city employees and a $100+ million city budget, a plain English interpretation of the phrase employment would stipulate that you are employed by the city of Allentown. The CEO of GE is employed by GE. The President of the United States is employed by the United States government. So an employee is an employee. So I think that council should vote no on this. And the other reason for my opinion on this is that this situation that we're finding is very different than if, say, the mayor had passed away or the mayor had taken a job somewhere else and decided to resign. There is an intense cloud over city government right now because of everything that's happened over the last 3 years. And I think that if we're going to err, we need to err on the side of caution. We need to err on the side of being open and frank with everyone. We have an opinion that states that this would not be following our rules. I think that we should follow our rules, follow the opinion. This is not an opinion on whether or not, since we're discussing specifically Mr. O'Connell, he would be a good mayor. This is a decision on, is he eligible to be mayor? So my request to my colleagues would be to vote no on Mr. Garidi's motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Ms. Appa?
Yes, now I'm ready. I'm also voting no on this. I believe that by not going with our solicitor's opinion, we're putting ourselves in a position of risking perception that we are practicing politics as usual, and therefore the process would be tainted. The last thing we need in this city is for our citizens to believe we are still not playing by the rules. So therefore, I encourage my colleagues to vote no on this.
Thank you, Ms. Appa. Anybody else from the dais?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I think the operative word here is appointed position, of which would be a bureau head or another employee. Here we're dealing with a mayoral position, which is in effect an elected position. The city charter was adapted, and in doing so at the time, the reason for that insertion in the charter was to prevent somebody at the time. City council members had pension rights as well as health care benefits, neither of which we have currently. There was a council person at that time who spent 24 years on council, who then got a job as a city planner under community and economic development. He then left with a 30-year pension. At the time the charter was developed, that was inserted in there, and as I believe it, to prevent that from happening in the future. Allentown's charter was adopted and copied after Reading's charter. Our city clerk has done some research. He was here, he is the one who supplied this information, and in checking with the city of Reading, of which our charter was copied after, they have no such prevention or provision in their charter. And in that case, council members would be eligible. I think it's a disservice to exclude council members. Mr. O'Connell, had Mr. McLean decided to run, I think it would be favorable for him also to have that opportunity. These are some of our most experienced members who have given much of their time and experience, and I think it would be a disservice to disallow them, and I would encourage my colleagues to allow them to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Anybody else from up here? Mr. Garidi?
If I may take it back, if nobody else, I want to say anything. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, Mr. President. Mr. Candidate, possibly. But anyway, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Hendricks, in regards to the reason, the rationale for this charter, with the person and the reason why it came to be, and it was because of the council person who wanted to get a job and augment his pension, basically, took advantage of it, and they fired that. That's not the case on this situation. The situation basically is that this is an elected position, not an appointed position, which we as council basically approve or disapprove or vote on for the mayor's appointees for directors and otherwise. It's an elected position, and that would be the case, then no council members should be able to run for mayor. And we have proven that we do that all the time. In every municipality, I don't know of any municipality that prohibits what is proposed today. And the opinion of our current solicitor, or interim solicitor, I should say. The previous solicitor allowed it to happen and thought that we could appoint somebody to an elected position, and that happened with Mr. Glazer, our controller. And I'm going on that basis. We have set precedent here. In addition to that, I think there is not an issue of tainted politics or politics as usual, as it was earlier indicated. It is just two different positions, opinions on two different attorneys. And an attorney that has been here for a very long time, who actually is running for Congress, and an attorney who is an interim person who has not been actually appointed by, or I would say voted on positively by council members. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
And just to say, I would encourage my colleagues to also support my motion.
Mr. President, could we actually get Ms. Fruworth to explain what the opinion is? I think before public comment, that might be useful. And also, Ms. Fruworth, just to clarify, the opinion that Mr. Greedy is referring to from our previous solicitor was not something that was done in a research and written opinion as this was, correct? There was a lot of research, and this is a written opinion. The previous opinion was not researched and was not put in writing, correct?
President, may I be heard?
Absolutely.
The opinion that was rendered to City Council by our office most recently on Section 209.c of the Home Rule Charter was a collaborative effort at the request of City Council as to what the meaning of that provision was. We approached it on a plain reading of English language, notion of statutory construction as required by law, and came to the conclusion that we reached. The prior solicitor, Ms. Wild, our office was not asked by council as a group to render legal advice on this particular provision. It was not submitted in writing as customarily the requests for legal advice are done. There was no collaboration, no independent research by the three associate solicitors in our office to arrive at a conclusion, debate it, and come to a consensus on what the actual answer would be, as it was under the current opinion. I hope that that suffices.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Your bag? No, I have it plugged
Just
in.
for me.
But I can plug it. How much power did it have? It had 20 when I plugged it in. Leave it in for now.
I heard that there was a written opinion on the previous request. Well, actually, not a request, but on the previous case. And I would like to ask Mr. Hanlon if there was such anything written that you acquired from Ms. Attorney Wild.
Ms. Wild, no, there's nothing in my records or nothing in anybody's records that's correct.
Okay, only this one was written.
Only this one was
right, thank you, Mr. Greedy. As protocol has it, we have to open it up to the public. We have a long night ahead of us, but if anybody wants to ask a question regarding the motion that is on the floor at this point in time, you may certainly step up to the podium and be heard.
Good evening, Council. Thank you.
Your name, please.
Anthony Toth, 2449 West Liberty Street, Allentown, PA. I don't have a question on it. I just have a few comments about it in reference to 209C. And it seems to be a contradiction of whether or not city employment, the term city employment. In my reading and my understanding and interpretation of the charter is that you can read it in plain English, but we can't just simply take 209C without looking at the charter in whole. You have to reference other parts of the charter in whole, not simply look at 209C. To me, it reads that it's broken down into two: elected public officials and public employees. The mayor, council, is an elected public official. They're not an employee of the city of Allentown. There's a distinct difference. All of you up here fill out this statement of financial interest form every year with the State Ethics Commission. When you do that, you have two choices. You have a number of choices, but two of the choices are public official or public employee. You as a council person, or as a mayor, or as a planning commission member, would pick the public official. A mayor is not an employee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Council. Edward John White, 1922 West Highland Street in Allentown. My comment and question are both regarding whether the council has considered and whether the solicitor's office has considered state law. There's a third-class municipal code that governs municipalities such as Allentown, and I just want to make sure that the council is aware of that. And I spent 25 years as an attorney. I looked at these provisions of both the home rule charter and the state law, and I can't render a legal opinion, but I can tell you in reading them, you have to look at both as a practical matter. And you're governed by state law as well as by the home rule charter, and I would urge you to consider state law in your decision. I'm not going to make a recommendation, but I just ask you to take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, that was brought
Yeah,
up.
that's a good question, Mr. President. What would you say that the state law say?
Well, one thing that's in plain English in the state law, which I can say, is that it defines the mayor and controller, the two positions that are relevant here, as elective offices, not appointed offices.
But that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing anybody else? Oh, sorry.
James Whitney, Allentown. If you're making the case for whether or not the replacement of our mayor, who was indicted on corruption charges, should be eligible, you should be able to make that case without bringing up a city where the mayor is also indicted on corruption charges. So it's kind of boggling to members of the community out here that the city of Reading is coming up in this discussion at all. I've said it before and I would say it again. O'Connell has all of the qualifications to be the mayor, and I believe that he has a big heart, and I believe that he cares about this community. But the current solicitor has made their opinion perfectly clear. He is not eligible. And if we decide to go against the solicitor's opinion and appoint him mayor anyway, it's going to make us appear as a city as though we learned nothing from the experience that we just went through with Mayor Pulaski. And there are people watching this process from Allentown, and there are reasonable people from New York, And there are reasonable people from all over the country who are asking themselves whether or not they should invest in this city, who don't want to invest in a city that appears to be playing politics as usual. So, he's qualified. Ray O'Connell's qualified. He is not eligible. And I would just add that if you can't manage a coin toss, you can't manage this city. So, he's qualified on paper, sure, but he's not eligible to run for mayor, and so we should just stop talking about it, and we should be beyond reproach. So that people here in the city and reasonable people all over the country are looking at Allentown and saying, there's a city that's playing by the rules, not trying to interpret them. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Robert Trotner, actually at this point, 1910 Bayard Street, Bethlehem. I wasn't going to speak tonight at all, but I want to make 3 points. Just so people understand what's going on here. This isn't, with all due respect to the solicitor, I'm not going to say what position I take. This is not a legal position. This is not a legal decision, it's a political decision, because there's 2 factions here, and we all know that, although the public may not know, there's one faction in one camp, another faction in another camp, and people are, at least 4 of the people here are going to vote based on what faction they are. That's my belief, and I think people should know that. And when the final vote comes out, it's going to become clear. We have a written opinion from a solicitor whose only claim to the position is that he's a holdover. He was appointed by Pulowski, and he's never been approved. The only right he has is as a holdover, not as a regular approved solicitor. And the other thing you got to consider is, I hope this doesn't happen, but if you vote one way, there may be a lawsuit, and that's going to foul everything up and throw everything hell in a handbasket. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak, but thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We have somebody else. I saw her hand go up. That's why I said okay too. But thanks.
Somebody else?
No, that was you.
Oh, okay. Hi, Becky Kiss, Allentown, Pennsylvania. I also want to echo what James said in regards to Reading. I mean, how are we comparing ourselves to that city? I think we're much better than that. And I also think that regardless of if Pulowski appointed the current solicitor or not, I don't think he wanted to be in the position where he would needed to have resigned as mayor. And I just don't think that Ray should be eligible for mayor either. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, if I could just, to make very clear here, the reason I referenced Reading was because that's what our charter was copied after. It has nothing to do with the current situation in Reading, and this charter was formed a long time ago, prior to any corruption. So that's the only reference and the only reason that reference was made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. I think the charter was dated in 1997, if I recall. 97, sorry. Not seeing anybody else from the public. I guess Mr. Hanlon, we'll move to a vote, but I just want to say that before we move to the vote, that I said to the press when I was interviewed that I did not agree with the opinion by the solicitor, but I did abide by the opinion of the solicitor, so my vote will be based on that.
Okay, on the motion to have Mr. O'Connell participate in the interview process, Ms. Zappa?
No.
Mr. Grady?
I'm going to say yes, and the reason why I say yes is because the Commonwealth law supersedes, the state law supersedes the city charter, and we're going to be sued if we don't follow this.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. McLean?
No.
Ms. Mota?
Yes.
Mr. Zuppel?
Yes.
Yep.
No.
Where's that? 48?
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanlon. We proceed on now. Sorry for the delay, but Mr. Patrick Palmer. And for those of you who have sheets in front of you, the candidates are expected to take 10 minutes for an opening statement and response to the question that they have been forwarded. There will then be an 8-minute follow-up by council and a 2-minute final pitch for your candidacy. So that's for those of you who aren't involved. The candidates got this in an email, so we're going to make sure that everybody abides by that time frame. So once Mr. Hanlon gets, Mr. Hanlon, there are copies of the questions and the scenario in the back.
And there are copies right here on the desk.
You can sit down at the desk, and if you want to move your microphone, channel 69, if you want to put the microphone over there, take the first seat here, and then we'll just make sure that the microphone is turned on. I see the red light, Mr. Hanlon, if we could just get the light green. Okay. All right, as soon as Mr. Hanlon gets the clock set, we will begin with Mr. Palmer. You understand, Mr. Palmer? 10 minutes for your opening statement. Council will have 8 minutes, and then I have 2 minutes for final pitch.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And I guess that probably would be good to inform the public that the names were drawn out of a hat in random order, and that's the order that we came up here with. So. Are we ready? Yep. Are you ready, Mike?
I am.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Palmer.
Okay. Well, City Council, hello. I'm here today to go ahead and let you know about the reasons why I feel that I would make an excellent mayor. Before we get started, I did plan on addressing the whole city of Allentown as well. I didn't realize I'd only be facing off, but that's fine as well. And I'd just like to start with saying I had this huge speech ready to address Allentown, but I guess, I'll go from here. And I can just look at all of your faces, and all of you, you don't really know me, you don't know much about me, but that's completely fine. I'm here to provide, some knowledge about myself and provide just some answers to questions that all of Allentown may have in terms of, what could some next steps that I would take be, what kind of candidate would I be, what can I bring to the table? And I can honestly say that I would bring the answers to all of these questions, not just answers, solutions. Okay, I would bring solutions to the questions that plague Allentown. I would bring solutions to the problems that plague Allentown. And not just as a temporary, as a bandage over a broken bone kind of thing. No, I would bring real solutions. One of the things that Abraham Lincoln, a once great president, said was, nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's courage, give him power. Power to make change. Power to truly step up and lead. Well, I'm here to prove that I can be the one to lead. I can lead Allentown past all of the negatives and past all of the previous situations that's taken place into a better, prosperous city. And by leading into a better, prosperous city, I don't mean just something where we have more technology all over or just bigger buildings or something like that. No, I mean prosperity through things like, well, I have 5 things that I'd like to go over. One would be education, crime rates, the homeless situation, the heroin epidemic that's destroying us, and the Lehigh County prison system as well. I can start with education. Now, I know as the mayor, you don't go much into education, but you still handle with the budget. You can still assist. And what I would like to do, one of the first things I would do is assist with Mr. Parker, our recently added superintendent, Thomas Parker, about working with things like getting out of this $28 million deficit that we're in. And one of the things that I can do for that is, we can work together and do things that would bring more money in through revenue, for instance, and have new, fresh minds, fresh teachers for our youth. Because I believe education starts at the early age. Normally that age we would say would be 3. And I know that we have programs such as Teachers Next Door, things like that, that we can do to bring teachers in. But I feel like we can expand on that. We can expand on programs like that to really get the young minds into Allentown that can help grow the economy and that can help teach our youths. Once we do that, we can have initiatives for after-school programs. Now I know that things aren't looking that great for after-school programs, but that's one of the things that I want to look at in terms of the budget. As being a businessman myself, I know that there are things that can be moved around in the budget to go ahead and assist. Because one of the things is, if we assist with after-school programs, that helps the communities in general. By assisting with the early learning processes, that also helps the community. That helps to prosper. Function of education is to teach one to think critically and intensively. Intelligence plus character, that is the true goal of education. So if we mold their character by doing different things like with the after-school programs, by assisting in the schools, and we help with their education from early on, we create, and with that we create a better community, we create a better economy, we continue to work and grow as a city. Another thing that I really wanted to touch base on was crime rate as well, as I mentioned. Now, I understand that the petty crime rate has been going down, which is great. They've also hired 80 new officers, which is even better. But in terms of violent crimes, they're not going down. They're still not even going down with the amount of the average for the state, or not the state, the country. So I want to bring back something that was more of like an old school thought process. Other cities have been doing it. Fort Lauderdale, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. It's something that's been done where they're bringing back the old thought process of the beat cops, with that lack of a better term. It's something where it's more of a presence that deters crime. It's not just the hiring of the more officers, it's the presence of them in our neighborhoods, in our communities. It's showed, that studies have showed that creates a lasting relationship with the neighborhood and in terms of unity and trust with the police. So with that combined, if we can bring that back to use these officers for situations like that, they then learn who the officers are. It goes from being just another man who's a police officer that someone can be afraid of. It turns into, this is an officer, this is Mike, this is John, this is someone who we respect, this is someone who we will listen to, this is an authority figure who we can relate to. That's another one of the things that I wanted to go ahead and do, because that's done something where it's reduced crimes by 3 per day or 15%. So 15% reduction in crime rate is a huge reduction in crime rate just for having people in the neighborhoods, in the communities, just walking or riding bikes around. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was the High County jail system. It's something where, once again, I know that you wouldn't get too much into it, but it doesn't mean that you can't work together with Warden Doning. That's another thing that I wanted to do. We can start with things that have proven to work in other systems. Now, as a large, one of the things that has proven to work has been cognitive behavioral health programs. Those are rooted in social learning studies. Those show that once you go through a process like that, 20%, only 20% of the people who have gone through that process have come back into the prison system, meaning that that's obviously working. If only 20% ever come back, that reduces crime in general. There was a governor in Mississippi. His name was Bill Bryant. He created a comprehensive criminal justice reform package. He called it HB 585. Without getting too much into it because of the timer that I'm on, some of the numbers that happened was within 2 years, the prison population, it dropped by a whole as 5%. So that would still include the people who were there for more than 2 years, but within 2 years, he's dropped the actual population itself. When you are released and let out, there's a 10% chance, it went up by 10% of you not coming back. So you then turn into a more productive member of society, which then helps the community as a whole, as I mentioned, which They're now getting jobs. They're now helping the unemployment rate. They're now working. They're helping the economy as a whole. The property crime rate that was done after he enacted this initiative fell by 27%. And that's within 2 years, that crime rate fell by 27%. I know it's the entire state, but it saved the entire state in a 4-year time span, $264 million. So once again, as it goes back to just helping with the economy of the city, that's something where I really want to look into and pushing an initiative similar to that. Another thing that's plaguing the city, one of my 5 points was the heroin epidemic, the opioid epidemic, just the epidemic in drugs in general. So in terms of just the entire country, Pennsylvania is the 4th highest death rate for heroin overdose, 7th highest due to opioids. The Lehigh Valley in Allentown, 190 deaths due to opioid use. That's a large amount. That doesn't include heroin, that's just opioid use. So there are some neighboring cities, some states have done something called the Immunity Initiative, and I'd like to bring that to Allentown. As far as I've seen, we don't have anything like that. It's something more of for certain crimes, if you are addicted to opioids or heroin, you would get an immunity as long as you agree to seek treatment. That's something that I would like to bring to the table in terms of helping these people lead a better life, which then helps the economy, which then helps Allentown greatly as well. I'd like to bring more awareness as well in terms of this opioid epidemic through Allentown. And the final thing that I really want to touch on was the homeless situation in Allentown and the neighboring cities as well. Easton, Allentown, Bethlehem, it's a huge problem in general, and without going further into it, sorry.